Hey, everyone, and welcome back to High Energy Podcast. I'm Esteban Gast, your host, and in this episode, we are turning up the heat. Literally, we're diving into the topic of urban heat islands, something that is affecting all of us here in Southern California, especially as the summers keep getting hotter. But we're not just going to talk about the problem. We are going to dig into it. Okay, we're going to talk about solutions. We're going to talk about what's happening. It's going to be wonderful and tangible and cool, very pun intended. And joining us today to walk us through this conversation, okay, I'm so delighted she's here. It's Amanda Begley. She's the Watershed Senior Program Manager for TreePeople. She is an expert in so many things, but especially relevant to this conversation is addressing urban heat islands, implementing strategies that make our cities cooler and greener. So I'm so excited to get into it. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, of course. Okay, before we even get into it, I would love to know, you have such a cool career. You've become this expert on making cities greener and more connected with nature and all this thing. What's like the high level of how you got there? If someone's listening and they go, oh, that's a really cool career path. How does one even begin this path?
Yeah, great question. So I was raised in an early adopter family with a high environmental ethic where the changes we need to make to our energy systems and transportation systems was just part of our everyday reality. And that really inspired me on how to make it more accessible for more folks, to educate them about what's happening with climate change and that there's so many amazing solutions that can make our lives better. So that's very exciting to share with people. And that led me to get a master's degree in urban sustainability from Antioch University, Los Angeles. And then 10 years ago, I started working at TreePeople.
Oh, that's amazing. TreePeople does a lot of things. I'm on their newsletter.
Oh, good.
And it's like so much culture. There's a comedy night coming up, which I very much appreciate.
Yes.
What's the blurb of TreePeople?
TreePeople is uniting the power of people and trees and nature-based solutions to make a more sustainable Southern California. So we have one of the largest environmental education programs in this part of the state. We do policy and research work. We have community organizers. And then, of course, we are planting lots of trees and doing restoration in our mountain areas, too.
That's so good. TreePeople. It's also like a thing you want to be. Like you want to be a tree person.
Right?
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like if someone's like, hey, have you met Esteban? I hope they go, Esteban, like a tree person. And I go, hey, that's me.
Right? And notice that the word TreePeople is one word. There is no separation between the people and the trees. You're really getting deep there.
Yeah. Even using the power of grammar to inspire.
Right. You're exactly. All the tools in the tool belt.
Every tool. All right. This episode specifically on urban heat islands, something admittedly I don't know too much about. I also grew up in environmental. My dad's a big environmental guy, which is great. And I moved to Southern California a few years ago. So this is somewhat new. Urban heat islands, especially if we're placing it in Southern California. Why are they such a big deal? Can you help us define it and think through that? Yeah, again, really placing us in SoCal.
For sure. So the urban heat island effect is this phenomena where our urbanized areas, our cities, are significantly warmer than surrounding rural areas or naturalized areas. Okay. So why is that? Because of the built environment. We have so many roads, buildings, concrete, asphalt parking lots, these things that absorb a tremendous amount of heat, right? And as you may have heard, in Southern California, we've had these accelerating heat waves, the trend of warmer and warmer years, and you may have heard that is bad for your health.
Yeah. So we're talking health impacts of heat wave, and we're also talking Southern California, a little bit of the way it is built, right?
Yes.
In terms of...
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, how does that... To me, something I love about climate is that it intersects with everything. You mentioned public health and equity and making sure we have fair and just cities the way that we're how do heat islands and heat waves affect things like public health and things like looking at a fair, just city?
Right. Yeah. There's a few things to that. One, we know research shows that after several days of heat, vulnerable populations, the older folks, the young, the sick, the infirm, they can have significant health challenges, right? I mean, even morbidity, right? If you look at what happened in the Pacific Northwest a few years ago, and that's a community that doesn't maybe have a lot of air conditioning because they never really need it. And like hundreds of people died in that heat wave. Southern California, the issue that we face here is this inequity of the built environment. There's some neighborhoods that have very low tree canopy cover, so there's not a lot of that shade that's sort of exasperating the heat island effect. There's not a lot of vegetation in these parts of town. And then you may go to other neighborhoods and there's tons of trees and tons of shade. And so there'll be these kind of like micro examples of the heat island effect within LA County, right? So how can we understand that and help prepare these communities by adding more vegetation, adding more trees, and helping cool them in that way?
Man, that is such a domino effect of like, here's a richer neighborhood that has more trees, and here's the repercussion of what happens, especially as things get heater.
Right.
Things get hotter.
Yeah, and there's like the connection between who has air conditioning too, right?
Yeah.
So like a lot of these older apartments and whatnot, they might not have air conditioning units, right? And we just went through, what was that, 5 days of over 100 degrees? And that means folks' apartments were probably not cooling down. Like it will be interesting or, a little scary to see what happened locally during that time, the rise in emergency room visits, things like that. So
this is good. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know what's happening. What are like some of the strategies that the cities are doing or communities are doing or people are doing? How do we start being like, this is a problem. Let's work to think of how to solve this.
Yes. And there are several things we can do. One, right, the one that we're talking about right now is just planting more trees. And why are trees such an exciting solution? Because it's not just about shade and cooling a neighborhood, right? You're also bringing more biodiversity. Now there is food source and a home for the local birds and different critters. There's also the mental health benefits that are well documented about people having nature in their area. You're more likely to recreate and get outside if there's more shade. So the multiple benefits that can happen from planting trees are beyond just cooling, right? So that idea of solving for multiple problems with one solution is very exciting.
I love it. Okay, so there's plant more trees, which are there other, like you mentioned asphalt and concrete. I'm part of that. I'm like, could we do something with that? Might we do something with concrete?
Yes. So there's, you might hear about cool surfaces or cool pavement or the cool roof initiative. So that's just, again, looking at our built environment. Okay, wait, our roofs, a lot of them are dark colored materials. Now that we know is going to absorb more heat into that building, which means we're going to have to crank the air conditioning up more, which will create more greenhouse gases that add to that heat trapping blanket that's causing climate change. What if the roofs were just painted a lighter color? Guess what? That helps. That simple thing helps. What if we coated some of the asphalt parking lots and that cool pavement, a protective seal that's just a lighter color, right? It's kind of basic, but it makes a big difference. So how do we use these suite of tools, more vegetated, nature-based solutions like trees and also cool surfaces to help combat this issue?
I love that part of the solution is just like high school science class that was like black absorbs heat.
Right.
And
Right?
We're at this point where we're like now being like, oh, black absorbs heat.
Maybe that wasn't a good idea. Yeah, to make the roofs.
Every surface black.
Right.
That's so interesting. That's our cities, when we're thinking about this, are cities, how are cities thinking about this? I suppose is my question. Like, is it all hands on deck? Is it like, hey, you know what? Let some organizations plant trees. Is it like neighborhood by neighborhood? Is it like listening to community? Like, because it just feels so big, right? LA is an enormous area.
Yeah, it's all of those things, really. Yeah, yeah. And I would say cities, the county, the state, they get it. We understand the dangers of extreme heat. And, LA now has a chief heat officer, right? That role did not exist a couple years ago. And the understanding that we really need to have this cross-departmental, cross-agency reckoning with this and what can we do? So, there is tree plantings, there's the cool surfaces, there's the various, like our county sustainability plan, there's the city sustainability plan. You will find in each of those plans information on how to combat extreme heat and with the tools and solutions that I'm discussing. Trees, cool surfaces, those things.
That's so good. I also know your work involves watershed management, which I'm sure connects and intersects with what we're talking about. But just in case I can't put it together right away, can you help connect watershed management and like urban heat islands, right? We're going back to this idea. What is that? How do those intersect?
It's like the same issue. We covered all the ground and concrete and pavement and asphalt, right? So not only is that making it hotter, but it's also making it, when we get that precious rainfall, it can't soak down into the ground, right? It can't refill our local water savings accounts, our groundwater basins, our aquifers. Instead, it's hitting the streets. It's picking up all these pollutants like motor oil or brake dust from your car or dog waste, right? And so now anytime we have a rain event, it's souping up all that stormwater pollution and it's funneling out into our receiving water bodies like the ocean. So now we have this nuisance. We have this problem twofold, right? We're not getting the water into our local water savings accounts, and we're also creating polluted water. Well, what can we do about that? How about we remove some of the concrete, right? I mean, it's that simple. We need to have more places for the water to soak in. And what can you do when you now have more exposed soil? You can plant more vegetation. You can plant more trees. We know that evapotranspiration happens and that helps cool, right? It's nature's air conditioning, that kind of original solar powered air conditioning that trees and vegetations do for our communities. So again, there's a concept of multi-solving. If we can help remove some of the concrete and asphalt in places where it makes sense, and we can help, increase the vegetation, we're not only dealing with addressing extreme heat, but we're also dealing with a lot of our water issues we've had in our region. So it's really a win-win.
It feels like so much of the solutions are just like go back to nature.
Right. And that's why you'll hear this phrase, nature-based solutions. And what is that? It's basically understanding that we can restore ecosystem functions by nature. Nature has been knowing how to clean the air, to clean pollutants out of the water, and do all of these things by natural processes. So we got really into concrete in our past, right? We wanted to solve every solution with more concrete. Well, that caused unintended consequences, right? We had flooding of the LA River. So they wanted to pave and constrict and control that water body. Okay. That dealt with the flooding issue, but now we have decreased water supply and increased water pollution. Like that's not great. So, and then we look at the native peoples who lived in this area for thousands of years, and they understood that land management and what we would maybe now call nature-based solutions was just an integral practice in their culture. So that just like really knowing where we are, seeing that we've always had this regime of extreme heat, flooding, dry periods, right? There's always been an element of extreme weather in Southern California that's now been supercharged with climate change. And we have tens of millions of people living down here, right? So the imperative to figure this out is high, but we know what to do and we are doing it, which is really exciting.
It feels like nature's like a very patiently waiting. And we were like, sorry, we were running around with concrete in Europe. And nature's like, that's okay. You're back home now.
Yes. And you know what's so exciting about that too is the rebound effect. Nature wants to just let it do its thing, right? You look at like marine protected areas where we've really tried to protect certain parts of the ocean, and the rebound and the fish populations happened like quicker than folks anticipated it too. Same with like letting water stay in Owens Lake, right? I don't know if you know, there's a big dust situation from us sucking all the water from the Eastern Sierras. Once we started to let water stay there, the bird populations rebounded faster than folks anticipated. So all of that is just, so inspiring and can give us agency and hope that there are things we can do, and let's just do them, right? So that's what keeps me going.
Something that we feel really excited about in the podcast is making sure that listeners have a way to like plug in and feel like they can do something. What does it look like? Are there stories of like community or neighborhoods or groups of people that have gotten together and like played a role in these efforts? Like, yeah, right. If someone goes, oh my gosh, of course, this is, if they're like, I'm listening, I'm like, oh yeah, we covered everything's with concrete and black surfaces. It's a pretty easy solve. This is something I'm passionate about. Like, where can I put my energy? Are there stories of communities or individuals going and doing some big things?
There's so many stories. And that's the other thing that makes me so excited about this work is community is out there making change. And the practitioners doing that are like the most awesome people. But yeah, let's like talk about the Safe Clean Water program. Those are public meetings. Folks could go on safecleanwaterla.com and look at where your watershed is and see where your watershed area steering committee meeting is. And you can give public comment, you can advocate for what kind of projects and needs your community is dealing with. So that's a great way to get involved. And then also TreePeople has volunteer events all around the county every week. So maybe you want to go up into the Angeles National Forest and do some mountain restoration, or go into an urban tree planting on a city street somewhere. There's so many opportunities to get involved. It's really exciting.
That's cool. In terms of like the reflective materials or cool roofs, Are there some resources? I'm sure TreePeople in some of the places, but if that's something that someone is like, oh yeah, I own my home and it is it's a black roof or whatever, a darker colored roof, what are ways for them to think through that? Because my sense is like, I don't know if it's as simple as like, just paint it another color. I imagine it might be a little more complicated.
Yeah, there's some great research out there that we've done too with TreePeople and Climate Resolve. It's called Prescription for Hot Cities, and it's on our website. And it talks about all this research that combines vegetation and cool surfaces and how you can really reduce those extreme heat events by doing a combination of those elements. Climate Resolve on their website also has a lot of resources and case studies around using cool pavement and the what went into the Cool Roofs initiative. So I think that would be a great place to look. Either the Prescription for Hot Cities report that's on the TreePeople website, or going to Climate Resolve and seeing different examples of this around our city and county.
So good. Okay, we have 2 questions from listeners that are relevant. But before then, before just knowing that that's coming up, what are stories of hope? Like, you're like, you know what, in the past few years, this is a thing that has happened, or you know what, like something as big as there's a waterway that is concrete and like there is support and we're actually starting to remove concrete and that has actually done these things. Because I think sometimes people just need good news. Can you hit us with some of those specific stories so people go, oh my gosh, there is, of course, momentum happening?
Yeah, I mean, I want to point to congratulate, really, the voters of LA County that in 2018, they passed Measure W that created the Safe Clean Water program, because that is earmarking $280 million a year that is funding these types of stormwater multi-benefit projects that can capture and clean our water supply and cool our urban environment. So there is over 100 projects that have now been funded through this public money. And so ribbon cuttings are starting to happen. You will start to see these projects in your neighborhood. If you go to the Safe Clean Water program website, there's a project portal map. Go and look, see which projects are around your community. You might not even know that they're happening. So more green streets, more enhanced park space, greening schools. Schools is a big one, right? You look at around the region and there's these asphalt play areas. And how do we address that, right? We want to make sure kids can be safe when they're out there playing and be able to recreate, not have to sit inside because it's too hot. So all of these kinds of things that are happening, this momentum is very exciting. And there's a major investment through the Safe Clean Water program happening every year.
That's awesome. Wow, that was 2018. Shout out everyone who voted yes in 2018.
Yay, we love that. See, positive results. And it's just been so cool to go from imagining this voter initiative to actual implementation, right? Breaking up the concrete, putting in more trees. It's really exciting. It's tangible. You can see the change.
Yeah. You're like, look, you voted for a thing and it's happening.
It's happening.
That's so good.
Yes.
Okay, we've got two. We told people, hey, we're talking to urban heat islands. Let us know your questions. So this is from Saul in Long Beach. And some of this we answered, but I'm still out of respect for Saul, I'm going to give you the questions and then we can find a way to navigate it because I think this is wonderful. Saul writes, what are the main contributors to urban heat islands in Southern California and how can urban planning help mitigate them?
Yeah. So I think we've been talking about it a lot, right? With all the concrete, asphalt, hardscape, and then planning, right? How can we think about different materials? Think about solving engineering problems with vegetated soil instead of concrete. And like I've said, people are hip to this. You know, I was just in a presentation with the Army Corps of Engineers yesterday, and they're talking about their nature designing by nature program, right? So it's the highest levels of government. We're now realizing, okay, we can do better. And not only does it do those things like cleaning our water and cooling our air, but it's also like better for our mental health. It's adding more community cohesion. You're more likely to get out and recreate. Like it just goes on and on and on of all of the positive things we can do with these infrastructure investments.
It also feels like because there is more awareness, new construction or new urban planning today is taking this into account, which is also feels encouraging.
There's an ordinance right now called the LID or low impact development. So any new construction has to be mindful of some of these elements. Like how are you capturing like the biggest storm water, like making sure that you're not getting a ton of pollution falling off of your home site, right? Like a lot of folks, you might have pavement and hardscape on your property that maybe you don't need all of it. Maybe your driveway could be cut up with some little spaces of green or mulch or whatnot, you know, like any way to let the water soak in and let there be more vegetation and help it cool the surrounding air.
That's so good. Okay, our next question is from Olivia in Culver City. Everyone loves community. She's curious about community involvement because I think for me sometimes so much of this feels exciting, but it feels far or it feels like I love a systems change, but also I'm unsure how I plug into the system.
Right.
So this is Olivia's question, which I love. Thank you so much, Olivia. And it's, can you provide examples of successful community-driven projects that have helped mitigate urban heat islands? Right? I think this answer of like, what does it look like to plug into a community?
Great question. Yeah, an example that came to mind right away, back to the schools issue, is Pacoima Middle School. There was a principal at that school who saw their campus is right next to the I-5. There wasn't a lot of trees or vegetation. There was a sea of asphalt. They were recording temperatures up to 130 degrees Fahrenheit on their asphalt where kids are supposed to play. And this principal had a dream of like, wait, I want to make this school cooler and greener and all of those things. And so she started to advocate and look to see what funding was available and partnered with TreePeople. And we've been able to break up 14,000 square feet of that asphalt and plant 107 trees. And that's all from the dream and the pushing of a principal and a school community and those parents and those teachers wanting better for their students and for the surrounding area, right? Like the whole neighborhood's going to be now impacted because it will be cooler. Again, it's going to be like a little mini heat island being negated by less asphalt, more trees. You're going to have more birds. You're going to have more butterflies, like all of those things. It's just really wonderful.
I love that. That story is so good. And that story is such a good example of exactly what I think Olivia is asking, right? It's like you can go to your school, your kid's school, and be like,
Yes.
wait a minute, there's a different, like that community involvement is such a good place to start of like plugging into a community and be like, wait a minute, there's a bunch of us who can
neighborhood
partner.
councils are also another great way. I'm really involved in my neighborhood council. It's been amazing. You know, I feel like there's this stereotype that LA, you're just so isolated and you don't know your neighbors. And that is not my experience, right? And so many of us who participate in the neighborhood councils, or you get to know your neighbors, or go to a volunteer event with an organization like TreePeople or Friends of the LA River, where you can get out and you can meet like-minded people and you can have some agency and see change in that day, right? When you walk up to a street tree planting, there's no shade on that street. And at the end of the day, you've come together with community, with neighbors, with new friends, and there is a noticeable, tangible difference in the air quality, in the temperatures, and the amount of butterflies and birds you're going to have. So, you know, there's so many ways to plug in. There's so much good work happening here in our region, and the people who are doing it are just the best. You've got friends out there. You just don't know it yet.
That's so good. Yeah. This has been so inspiring. This is the best. Thanks for... I feel like talking to you, I'm like, you know what? We're going to be okay.
We're going to be okay. We're
going to be fine.
Yes. And it'll make you feel better, right? Like sitting home and being bummed out about it is not good for your health either. So get out there, be part of the solution. There's so many ways to plug in, and it's good. It's a good time. You know?
I love it. Thank you so much for all these insights. And thanks for like affirming and reinforcing the fact that there's so much we can do to make our city cooler and healthier and more equitable and like better for mental health. I mean, totally what you're talking about, all the benefits. It's like, it's not just watershed management, something that maybe to me sounds a little scientific. It's like, oh, what we're talking about is quality of life and like breathable air and like less things like floods, less things, better ways to manage things like extreme heat or
you get it. Look, you're an expert now too. See? See how easy it is?
I am just quoting you. You're like, you get it. And I was like, I'm quoting you word for word. And now I sound smart. So that's somehow this happened.
Love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, things we talked about. Urban heat islands are this serious issue. That's the theme of today, especially as Southern California warms and continues warming. But there's so much good news. There's practical solutions, planting trees, reflective materials like cooling materials. There's so many resources, so many people and organizations doing good work. I love also being like those organizations are filled with people that if you're listening to this podcast, surely you would get along with. Like obviously these people would be your best friends, unrelated, but also helps make a city more livable is having a bunch of best friends. So thank you so much. For our listeners, I mean, this is a really good, fun challenge of like, there's so many things happening. We can go to a small organization event or a volunteer event, especially something, if you're passionate about a particular thing, you can plug in. There's so many ways. Thank you so much for giving us the examples. I really love the school example. That is awesome. And like also just an incredible challenge of like people are doing this. So thank you. We have in the show notes links to all the resources. We're going to listen to everything Amanda said and we're going to be like, great, noted, link to all the links she's talking about. So if you're listening, you can just go blip and plug in. And also we love questions. Thank you, Saul. Thank you, Olivia. Questions this week. You can send questions to highenergypodcast@SoCalRen.org. I promise we'll answer them and they're wonderful. Amanda, thank you for being here. This was truly a hoot.
Super fun. Yay.
And thank you, listener, for tuning into High Energy. Until next time, stay cool and keep making a difference. I'm Esteban. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening.